things that I learned about one of your superpowers in 2014 is that you can read what people activate. This has been life-changing for me, so clarifying. And over time, we determined that this actually comes in with the person. So they're born with the activation like they're born with their fingerprints. And that it is a very powerful energetic in their lives. So becoming aware of what your activation is, wow, how powerful is that?
Yeah.
And I, who of course am very focused on life purpose and life lesson in people's schools and knowing what their hands are all about, have found the activation information extremely enhancing. Because I, of course, can track it back to my hands, and I've done that with many people I know whose activations I know, and I know it's in their hands. I can track it back to their hands. So it all feels to me like it's all part of the soul agreement process, not different. It's not outside the box and different from what we already may know through some other system of human design or astrology or hands or whatever. So would you share with us what DNA activation, like where the DNA energetic conversation came from and what an activation actually is?
Oh, yeah. So the history of it, how it came to me was when I was working with some clients and I was doing my empire building program, and I was doing some journaling because everybody was having, I was perceiving that everybody was having a really difficult time. And I just knew, like, this is so easy, like, it's so easy. Why is it so difficult? And so I'm journaling, I'm sitting there with my little pen and writing. And I asked the question, what can I do to make them understand that it's so much easier than they think? And I immediately got the answer: there's nothing you can do to make them think anything. They're going to think what they want. And here are 24 plus ways to activate your DNA. And I'm writing this and I'm kind of in this curious state. Okay. And so asking, like, so what is it? And so I just started writing, and they were little things like looking at ourselves in the mirror, like looking at our eyes in the mirror, and a state of self-appreciation, without judgment and without trying to figure anything out. And through that process, I came to understand that self-appreciation was like this, and there were 24 other things that we can do, like look at the palm, the lines on our hands, just look and observe in a state of self-appreciation, without judgment and without trying to figure it out, unless that's your job, right?
Right.
But just being and like appreciating it, you're mapped out, like there's lines on you, there's, just appreciating yourself without judgment and without trying to figure it out, which is tough because we're problem solvers. But through this process, we collectively, thank you, Pamelah, you've been a huge part of this, because you were there, I think, from that moment. I was in one of your groups when that sparked. One of your intuitive groups. I can't remember what it was. It might
It's a class on life lesson, I think.
A class on life lesson. Yeah. So, this was in a Facebook group, and I remember writing this down, and this invitation came, like, to share, create a group and share that, and I invited a handful of people, and the interest was just there to just explore, right? It was just an exploration. And the DNA part was like, and I'm like, well, what is this? Activate our own DNA. And at that point, I had already named my business DNA International Coaching, like many years ago, based on my initials. And then I thought DNA was cool. And, somebody else told me, like, you should name your business DNA. And I was like, oh yeah, that is cool. So I didn't know what that really stood for, other than Dawn Nocera, until years later. I went on a shamanic journey and walked out, and I understood it meant divine natural alignment, DNA, divine natural alignment. So you and the divine are aligned and are one, like sovereign unity. That's what that means. Like, you are your own individual and you're united. And that brought me like so much comfort. And then as I'm writing these, what are the 24 plus ways? And they're all connected to self-appreciation. And we started practicing, and I started feeling the difference in my body of like what it feels like to appreciate myself. Really, like what does that feeling feel like? The more I got into that feeling, the more I was able to then appreciate other people. And before long, I get an email from you that says, here's a recording of my voice. And I was like, oh, your voice activates healing abuse, like all of your, self-abuse and abuse from others. And that kind of just sparked it. It was like, it was just the inspiration that came through me. But I knew it was true, like absolutely no doubt about it. Like that was a true statement. And so then I started playing with art, or I can't remember the chronology of whether or not the art came first or your recording, but we started.
The recording came first, and then applying it to art, in our group.
Yeah, that's right.
We were posting in our self-appreciation group about all the people in the group at that time were artists, and so we were posting a lot about gaining confidence and having a shift in our lives about our relationship with art. Yeah. And as a result of that, of course, you were doing everybody's activations, and it was only like 8 of us,
right,
in that self-appreciation group, but you're starting to do everybody's activations and seeing the relationship between the art and the activations.
Yeah. So we were, originally, so I did the artivation.
Yes.
Remember that?
Yes, so I love that.
Brought in different artists, and some of them were in the group, some of them were outside the group. And I did this, I would read their art and was reading what their art activated. And through that process, because different pieces of art would activate and turn on something different. And that's really what it is. It's like that turning something on in somebody else. It's what I've come to understand. I'll get to that in a second. I want to finish my thought about the artivation thing. So we were I was reading everybody's artwork, and then there was like an underlying energy. Each artwork had an individual energy that it activated, but behind it there was something deeper. And I'm like, oh, like that's the artist's energy, like that's their activation. And from there, like it just feels like everything just kind of like opened up. Once I could touch and feel like that pure essence, that divine natural alignment beyond the energy that I was feeling from what they do or what they produce or what they create, but what's that energy that's in their body, and what is it turning on in the world around them? So I guess that other piece of that question was, what is it? And I've come to understand it to be like, we're walking around and we have this energy in us that turns a similar energy on in somebody else. So for Pamelah, her energy is, one of her activation codes is for healing. The energy just creates this space for healing for self-abuse and abuse from others. So you have like now an opening, a door that is now open where healing can begin, where it may have been a really hard struggle before she's in your space. And it's like our choice, like the person who's in her space, to whether or not they want to walk through that door or not. And for some people, it triggers them to no end. Like they're like, no, I am not ready to heal that wound. That's horrible. Never in this lifetime am I going to go, I will never go through that door. But the magical thing about the activation energy is it just sparks that opening. So even if they don't walk through it now, and even if they're triggered now, there's been an opening. Like something's been turned on in them. Sometimes it's an awareness, of the pain, that's up for healing, and they could go running.
Right.
Or they are, the energy itself just starts to work in them. So we don't have to take all the burden or the big responsibility of, we have to be the ones that fix them or heal them. No one's broken anyways, but it's our energy that is able to help others shift. And then when we've come to understand now is like, as our work and our energy work together, it's magical, because now we're doing the thing that our energy came here to do. Like our divine sovereign self came here to do something, whether or not our physical bodies were on board or our minds were on board. We're walking around healing, activating. We've got people who activate superpowers. So in her space, you might start feeling very aware of like energies from other worlds. And you may just know things that you've never known before. Just all these wonderful things that you can activate. And from readings for so many years now, it's been a while, I've learned that people activate just so many things are needed on this planet. So we're activating so many different things. And then there's there's people that I've known of and I've read for, a few of them, who are here to activate integrity. And they activate it in a kind of a different way, but I feel like it must be really needed on the planet for there to be more people, like collective, at least in my sample group,
Right.
people who are here to just turn that energy on. So people then are in alignment in integrity with their words, with their actions. So they begin to do what they say, and they begin to act on their words. If they say they're going to do something, all of a sudden they begin to do the things that they say they're going to do. That's an effect of an energy being activated in you of integrity, but we don't think about that. So that's kind of what it is. And there's either the response that other people get to our energy is either they are resistant
Or repelled.
Repelled, right? They can totally be repelled, or they're just drawn into it. They might not even know what it is about us that they're just drawn to, but they know that there's resonance. They know that there's something that they want to experience within us. And the more we can be in that space of appreciating ourselves, the more that energy actually is amplified. So that's what I'm excited about, because the more we appreciate, the more we're in alignment with who we really came here to be.
Right. So I have a great story to share about this. I have many stories, but I'll share one initially. Since I activate healing abuse and healing self-abuse and abuse of others or from others, when in 2015, which was a year after you recognized and told me about my first activation of healing abuse, I was in part of a group that met 3 times a year. It was sort of a networking group, but it was a business group. And there were some people where there was nothing ever more than a high, low. There was like no interaction. We never ended up in the same small group or whatever. And I recognized at the time that it just wasn't a vibrational match for my activation or what they activated, that I wasn't feeling called to have a relationship with. The people that I did get to know and have a deeper connection with, of course there was whatever they were activating, what I was activating, we were asking for that from each other, right? Because everything is a vibrational match in the universe, and it's asking, it is given. So if they hadn't been asking for what I activate, there would be no reason. It would be like magnets just, repelling each other, right? So it helped me a lot take any judgment off about whether somebody liked me, wanted to be with me, hang out with me, was my client, right? Clearly, if they're my client, there's going to be something related to my activation that is in their request field. Like they're asking some aspect of healing their own abuse in some way, or obviously it has to start with their own, because all the abuse from the outside is related to self anyway. But so that's and if they're not asking for that, they're not going to be my client. Whether they're conscious of it or not, doesn't matter if the language is in their head. Their vibration knows that there's something that I can provide. Well, that's going to be true for everybody, whatever their activation is, their clients are asking for what they activate, or they wouldn't be their clients. That's been a super helpful consciousness for me to understand about my clients. Then I have to show up in my activation.
Yeah.
I have to have that be part of the conversation that's going on, right? It doesn't, and I may not use the word abuse ever in the conversation. There are many other ways to get around that word unless it's the appropriate thing. But that's important in my next activation of bonding, which you came up with later, by the way. I just want to say these did not all come at one time.
Yes.
It happened for you with other people where another activation came later. It's not that your consciousness is always there, or they're not ready to hear it, or whatever it is. So some people have one, some have two, I have three. I know somebody else who has three. A couple people that I know that you've read for that have three. So it's expanding, and I also want to say I'm consciously aware of this and consciously aware that my relationship with my activation is changing. Shifts.
Yeah.
Like everything, right?
Yeah. So tell me about how your relationship with your activation has changed, or what shifts have you noticed? Because there's a timing thing involved, but I'm curious.
Well, the first conversation, was an email saying back your voice activates. So, healing abuse. So I'm thinking it's only when I sing, right? Because I sent you a song, right? That was my first response, because that's what you said. It was a 1-sentence email, right?
Yeah, it was.
Your voice activates healing abuse. What? What? So I thought it was just my voice. So over multiple conversations, I realized that it was an energetic in my field. So that's one thing that changes. I realized and then what also changed is when we came to clarity that this is a soul agreement, and we've had it since with us from birth or before birth, whenever, like the fingerprints are formed 16 weeks after conception. So maybe at that same time, we don't know, but maybe that soul agreement is in alignment. So learning that it's a soul agreement was also another shift that happened, and that I've had it my whole life, which explains some relationships in my past, right?
Oh, yeah.
That was very clarifying, like why some people didn't want to hang out with me and other people did, and some people would cling and whatever it was. The other piece that was really important, that's been also an ongoing shift, is understanding how my art activates my bonding and sweet spot, as well as healing abuse. And not just anybody wants to have my art. So I don't have to take it personally if somebody doesn't want my art, right? So that has been a super helpful thing, which is understanding the application of where it applies and how it applies. And of course, not taking things personally has been very important. And realizing I'm now back around my family a lot for this last month. And I'm imagining that I haven't been much near my family in most of 17 years. So my presence is very triggering for a lot of people. And so I'm having to it took me a while to recognize, my activation is triggering all these people. And they're not happy about it. They don't want me to be dealing with, they don't want to be dealing with their activations in my spirit.
Right. Yeah. I think
but it's not conscious.
No, it's not conscious at all. I mean, you're just bringing up a point. Like, I feel that those of us who have multiple activation codes, and I really feel that most of us do, but the ones who are really signed up to be conscious of all of, like as much as they can about themselves, like self-awareness, are really here to help the transformation of people, like your coach, and who end up touching many more lives than what you would normally, if you're not ready to be consciously aware of all this stuff. So I'm feeling that there is like, a desire to be, and a need for us to be in that field of somehow being transformational catalysts or whatever. And not to say that not everybody is, because I really believe that we all have a capacity, and that DNA, that activation code within us. And some of us are just walking around the planet completely unconscious, and they're still they're still triggering people or inviting people through that door. So
right. So, and what is your activation, or I know you have at least two that you're aware of.
yeah, so my activations are honest truth and true abundance. So typically the people who are wanting to, be in my space and like are really drawn to me are those who are asking for both abundance and truth, which it's like going through the needle, right? It's going through the eye of the needle, because we think it's about money. And for most people, abundance is, they only think it's about money, but their true heart, where they feel the most abundance, doesn't always have a lot to do with money. But it triggers people, because when people are feeling the energy of abundance, a lot of them have, because their only experience or only understanding of abundance or prosperity is money. And so they think money, they just think in terms of black and white. It's either money, like I'm going to work with Dawn and I'm going to get money. And like, that's the result that they expect from me. And then as the communication, of course, is, is there, and the education. Now I have a lot of years of being able to educate people and to share that the things that they think will get them abundance are not true. So, and it comes down to just feeling the energies, and the more we know who we are energetically, the more we can feel like, I wonder what energy is up for that person. Like, I wonder what they're responding to now, like which activation code, or maybe it's a combination of all of them, and that can sometimes feel overwhelming for people. And the brilliant part about our activation codes is we didn't just wake up and have them. They've actually been with us all of our lives. So we actually have a whole lifetime of experience of helping people deal with the energy that we bring to the world. Like, I have a whole lifetime of experience of helping people deal with their emotions around money, deal with receiving the truth that, like, they might have been living a lie, and all of a sudden they see the truth. And, like, I have a lifetime of experience of helping people work through that. So now that I'm we work with people, and we have this whole library of our own life that kind of aids us doing that consciously in the future. So it's not like all of a sudden you wake up and you're told that you activate healing abuse and you have no skill sets, right? Like, that would never happen. Like, you have all the skill sets because you've been doing it all your life.
Now have a language for it.
Right. And now you have a language for it. And yes.
Because I was told in 2007, which was 7 years before this, that I am here to help deal with neglect and abuse. Like, I already had that language, but it was a different language. And the fact that I activated was a whole different consciousness. Yeah. Like, helping people deal with neglect and abuse is a whole different thing than activating healing abuse. Right? That's a very different language. It's a different energetic completely.
Yeah. I think one of the things that really helps me when I'm understanding the kind of the bigger impact of what activation, like why should people even care about their own activation codes, right? It requires us to like take the mental stuff out and really go in and feel around and really connect to an energy that's in you. You can't think your way through this because it has its life of its own, and it's an energy. So the more we're in tune to the energy that's flowing through us, which is our life force, which is, the DNA, our divine natural alignment with something much bigger than us, and in a space where we're completely sovereign, where we're own people, right? And we are united. But getting that like just to begin to understand ourselves as an energy, as opposed to like, you know, the action that we put out being the most important thing. It's the energy that's behind the action that makes your artwork so unique, right? Like it's the energy behind the writing that makes your books so magical. And when some people are really easy, it's easy for them to tune into the energy, you know, behind everything. You always are feeling everything.
Right.
And when you're feeling everything, sometimes it's more of like a triggering effect, right? Because you just like, because you feel it all the time. And for me, I know when I understand my own activation of truth, like that is the full spectrum of what is truth, right? That, which means it includes non-truth. Like the full spectrum of truth is non-truth. So which means like I might find people being very untruthful to me. And if I were to judge that as like, that's just wrong and they're always lying to me, instead of like helping them find their truth, which is what I do now, you know, like helping them find the truth in what they're saying. Because sometimes there's half truths and and it just could just all, you know, be that they're just not telling the truth.
It could be a mental truth versus
an
emotional truth. This is one of the things I found in having so
Yeah.
many conversations with you, that sometimes when I'm in a mental state, I believe that what I'm saying is true mentally.
Yeah.
But when I get into a trusting state or in more alignment with my guidance or more alignment with my emotional state, there's a different truth that emerges that feels more true and more aligned. But you can see that.
Yeah.
Right? You can tell when I'm in a mental, really not truth, but I believe what I'm telling you.
Yes, yeah. And yes, and it's an energy, and it's just like those little subtle energies. And you do the same thing for me. And but yeah, I just get excited because that takes the focus off of the things that we thought were important, and it puts it on the energy. And we can really then appreciate ourselves for being these real spiritual beings, not just theoretically, you know, but like appreciating our energetic bodies. And when we do that, it gives us more energy because we're feeding our own field, we're feeding our own life force. And when we do that, then then our energy field goes out farther. People farther distances away from us are receiving the benefits of our activation codes, whether or not we like them or don't like them. You know, like you just can't stop the goodness that comes from us appreciating our own energy. So
let's, if you can, and I will help also, talk about, just put out some of the words that you have come up with for people's activations.
We talked about integrity. I have an activation of superpowers, which I spoke about. Peace, pure feminine energy, unconditional love, polarity, which is a really great one because then, you know, you actually feel those both opposite ends of the spectrum of whatever you're struggling with. So you're more aware of like the duality, right? But that's polarity. Big vision. There are big vision activators in the world who, you know, will spark that. Their energy just sparks the bigger picture, like beyond what you've been thinking. And let me see, what are some of the others? There's been so many. Soul, right? Soul, yes, yeah. Soul energies. Oh my gosh, you're taking me back.
Yes. Back to the beginning days of when
back to the beginning days. Oh, and there's and goddess energy, like really activating the goddess energy that's inside of us. So that
body confidence,
absolutely. Which, you know, you hear these words and they may not, they're just words until you check in and just feel them, right? So I share the words of somebody else's activation, and that kind of comes in and there's a possibility for it to be activating and turning something on in you because of the way those energies work. Not you particularly, but anybody who's watching this. But
Right.
yeah, gosh, there's
Dark silence is another one.
Oh yes, dark silence. And I had this woman who activated winter. And I just remember I just wanted to cry because it was such a beautiful, like, it was also like kind of like dark silence. It was such a beautiful space. You know, we need summer, we need spring, we need fall, but like the winter is like that. Things are blanketed with snow and there is a silence in it. And there's, you know, the warm fires, and, you know, and she was like, and then told me her whole life story about how winters are so important to her. And, you know, but like, it just brought up so much. I had somebody at one point, one of the very first people that I read for, and she activated like the fairy kingdom. Like she actually turned on the fairy kingdom. Like her whole energy was just to like turn on the fairy kingdom wherever it was. And in us, like turn on the fairy kingdom within our bodies. And I thought that was really fantastic. Of course, there's, you know, safety and security. That's a huge one. So it helps people walk through a lot of fear, or they just white knuckle that. Like, God, no, I just like, I am not going there. I'm so afraid. And then, you know, her natural ability to help people move through that is a part of that. Oh my gosh.
Belonging.
Or so oh yes,
family,
yes. Belonging
family.
and family. And there's so many stories that, you know, go into all of these activations, and what does that feel like and how people respond to it. Yeah, belonging and bonding, and the sweet spot, which is one of Pamelah's. And that's a beautiful one too. That's where everything's aligned, and just feels like the path of least resistance. That's the feeling, like, oh, but that's the sweet spot. And
I use that phrase a lot, the path of least resistance. I use that a lot. Yeah.
And so, and I've come to understand that the words that I get are sort of important. You know, the people who receive the words to their activation. I'm just remembering one, because some people will resist it. Because I had one that was no, I don't activate that. I'm like, I don't know what to tell you, but you do. This is
so let's find a way to have a relationship with it.
Right. And yes, exactly. Let's find a way to have a relationship with the thing that you're put on the planet to turn on. And like, we're so sometimes, because of the culture or whatever, that we're kind of taught to repress parts of us because society thinks it's like like that's not needed, right? But it's like the thing that's needed the most. And there's another woman who activates like mental health. Like, isn't that a great one to just know that when you're in her space, that mental health is turned on, so you can just feel like, you know, your mind being healthy and your emotion, you know, that mind body connection being repaired, or somehow there's more awareness to it not being never broken that's brought into the field. And the Kundalini energy, which I've come to really understand, is just pure life force energy. It's you know, it's about breaking away from also any systems that would stop you from just being yourself and living powerfully in your life. And I have had that conversation with her. So she
good. I'm glad to hear that, because she was confused about her activation.
Yeah. And so, you know, there's been so many. I could probably pull them up, but those are some of the words. And there's a ton more that I don't know about. And then there's people, I don't typically just read people unless there's an invitation. But every once in a while, I will sit there and I will be like, why am I reacting this way to this person? What's going on? Like, why am I responding so strongly to, you know, this other human who has obviously not done anything other than just be in my space? And then I'll feel in. and it'll be something that I really need that I'm resisting in my life. You know, like they're activating, the word is coming up right now would be delegation, but that's not like but possibly, you know, like they're activating like that support system where you could be, you know, delegate some stuff. And I'm like, wow, wow.
So I have a couple of questions
Yeah.
that I want to throw in and a comment about when you're in a group of people where everybody has an activation going,
Yeah.
right? And if it's a small group, 5 or 6 people, right, it can be pretty handled mostly. And there's usually very strong law of attraction that these people came together and they're activating each other.
Yeah.
Unconsciously, because most people don't know that they're activating anything unless they've had some kind of information about it, right?
Right.
So, but that process is going on. I have had a lot of family members visiting. My mom has been kind of declining. She's 98. And so a lot of family members have been coming as I'm staying with my parents to come visit her. And sometimes I love my family members, but sometimes I get just completely overwhelmed with having all the activations in the room at the same time. It's just too much for me, right? So I go into my room for a little while, or I do something else, or I numb out, which is what I do sometimes on the student path, on the conditioned path of the abuse, the self-abuse of what I do when I'm not healing it or being in the presence of healing as I shut it down. So one of my challenges side. So my question is, when you are in a group and everybody's activating something, is there any suggestion on how to stay in alignment and consciousness of your own activation so that you can stay present?
I think the most important thing is always to go back to self-appreciation. I know it's like a simple little thing, and
It's not simple.
all roads
That's
go,
simple.
yeah, all roads go back to self-appreciation, but it's giving ourselves time to be in our own energy. And because our own energy is the only thing that fuels us, and being with somebody else who appreciates us amplifies that. So when you and I are together, you know, and we're appreciating each other, it rejuvenates our energy. Like it gives us like more clarity and more capacity to receive. Right. And so we become energetically bigger and cleaner, right? Like our fields are more clear and more clean and more expansive. But when there's other people and the more unconscious they are of who they are, the more they'll project their stuff onto us. So it's, you know, it's a learning dance. I'm coming to understand that the more we have groups of people, of like 4 or 5 people who understand who we are, appreciate us, that we can be in those groups and kind of recharge and rebattery ourselves, and get our, you know, clean the energy field through that mutual appreciation and through self-appreciation first, always first. That the more those other things don't affect us as much, but it doesn't mean they're not going to, because the more you are turned on, like the more you're turned on and living the life that you're meant to live, the more other people will project their notness or their feelings that they're not doing what they want to be doing onto us. And it could be tough. So self-appreciation, absolutely. And then surrounding yourself with people who know themselves, whether or not they know their activation code or not, but you surround yourself with people who know themselves and who are willing to have conversations that are tough. So you are practiced. And when those conversations come up with other people, you're practiced hearing yourself talk. So you can talk with more freedom and without being as triggered as you would be. Like that's what I do.
Yes. All right. Well, that's good.
Yeah.
That's very good advice. Yeah.
And then like any group that's bigger than like a group of 150, I don't know. This is just like coming into my awareness like in this second. it's not helpful for us. It's just not a helpful place to be. So like if we go and we're a part of a big audience, unless it's like music or something that we're really resonating with, and the music is like the all of everything that it is, it's just not helpful. It's really not. It's like mob mentality. So some people go to amusement parks, and that can be really a toxic place for people who are consciously aware of the energies around them.
Right.
So.
I remember before we had this conversation going to Disneyland. My nephew works there, and I love that he works there, and it was wonderful to see him sing. And I was exhausted.
Yeah.
Because I was just overwhelmed with all of the energy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But yeah.
Yeah. And I was at the top of, this is kind of random, but I'm thinking about it now. I was at the top of the Great Wall of China, one of the little spots on it. And I remember being surrounded, like just everywhere I looked, there was just a sea of people, and mostly they were locals. So I was like the white blonde hair, blue-eyed girl amongst all these people, and thousands of them. You could just see them everywhere. And I remember feeling overwhelmed, like, oh my gosh, what am I doing here? Like I could feel like that feeling of feeling everybody's energy. And I just got that nice little reminder, like, oh, Dawn, you're here to activate abundance and truth. And all these people that are here today signed up to be a part of that giving and receiving process with you. And I just remember thinking, oh yeah. So even in those big masses and mobs of people, you can still manage it if we're super conscious of who we are, staying present to our own being, and not getting out of ourselves because someone bumps into us, and you know, because
Right.
that happened.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I totally understand that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So good. Any last minute things you want to share?
This is one of the most rewarding things that I've ever done in my life. I feel reading people's activation codes, being able to help them understand who they are energetically, like that soul level energy that's in them. It feels so, excuse me, it feels so rewarding to me. And I can't describe the feeling. It is like mutual appreciation on fire. So, and
Yes.
it's just beautiful. So, and I love learning about everybody through their activation codes, because it's definitely a deeper level of learning.
It is. And I just want to recommend, if anybody has a session with Dawn, first of all, do it. But second of all, be prepared to want to come back and have 3 or 4 more conversations. Because Dawn and I are friends, we talk about this all the time, and we've been doing it for 5 years.
Yeah.
So I feel very privileged to have a lot of inside information. But had I not had multiple conversations with her, I don't know that I would have really begun to understand how my activation works. So I encourage you, if you have an activation reading with her, that you prepare yourself to want to come back for a second or third or fourth session over time. You don't have to do it immediately, but over time, to see how you're implementing and how you are expanding, and questions you may have, and what you want to know more about how your activation is actually.
Yeah. Yay. Well, thank you, Pamela. This has been wonderful. I love the fact that we got to do this together. So.
Me too.